Today's guest is Kyle Steed, illustrator, letterer, and self-proclaimed professional creator of things. Kyle talks about expressing your true self, letting go of perfection, and gives his thoughts on the rise of all things handmade. We talk motivation and being around the people that support you and your endeavors. Now let's get to know a little bit more about Kyle Steed. Kyle, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So before we continue, pencil or pixel?
Pencil, absolutely. Or a Sharpie.
Sweet.
Depends on what I'm drawing.
A lot of your stuff, is it sort of, I don't know, do you switch between pencil or pens and markers?
I do. I have a whole bunch in my bag. Can I show you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything starts with pencil, but this is just a hand grab of what's in my bag.
Holy. You even have brushes
Anyway.
in there. How do you do that? Do you carry paint?
Well, some of them are brush markers. So,
Okay.
this guy's just a big fat, oil, actually, it's acrylic paint marker. So, yeah, it depends on the medium, whatever I'm drawing on.
So I've given a brief introduction of what you do, but for those who are not familiar with your work, tell us a little bit more about the kind of work that you produce and more of what you do.
Yeah, so mainly the kind of work I do would be illustrating, lettering, a little bit of typographic work, some mobile photography work, small amount of identity and logo design work. I don't dabble too much in web design, even though that's kind of where I got started in all of this craziness back in 2007. But the past 3 years now, I've mainly switched gears to focus more on the illustrating things that are done by hand. And recently, within the last year, I've dabbled into murals and public space artwork where I'm taking the designs that I create and putting them outside of the computer and onto large buildings or inside of stores or on windows.
So like creating signs and whatnot, murals too, of course, but also like
hmm
signage. Is that what you're
A little
saying?
bit of signage, yeah. I did a piece for a pop-up shop a couple months ago here in my neighborhood, and they wanted, there's like four girls that were going to share the space for one day, and they just wanted to have some. They basically left the concept open to me to come up with designs, and then we just used the one-shot paint on the windows, which is the sign painting, um, paint. It's like an enamel-based uh, paint. But yeah, it was super fun. It was the first time I had actually used that product. So much of what I do, I feel like I'm doing for the first time, but I love the challenge of trying something new and just kind of figuring it out as I go along.
Sweet. Kyle, I consider you to be a designer and illustrator, but I may be wrong. What do you consider yourself? What kind of work is it that you do?
I
You seem
like
to
the
dabble
label.
into so many different things, and it's good.
So I had the self-proclaimed title of professional doodler a couple years ago. Well, I guess like a year, whatever. But now I just saying professional creator of things because I don't know. It's easy to put ourselves into the boxes of designer or web designer, or I mean, you could get so niche with it. But I like to create a lot of different things. So whether that is a logo design or a mural design or a piece of lettering, but I also like to create things out of wood and stuff that I do around my house too. And I feel like that's all part of my creative process.
Sweet. Let's take it back before you started your career in illustration and design,
Okay.
making things. What was it that you were doing prior to that?
Well, so when I was really little, maybe 6, 7, 8. I don't know. I'm really bad at those years and what age I was. But architecture was a really big influence to me, and I love the symmetry, the organization, and the way that you could just make things fit into certain spaces and divide spaces up. I love this. I mean, I never was really one for school. Um So I would sit a lot and just draw and doodle, whatever. But specifically, I was really interested in house plans for some reason. So I would, from memory, draw the house that we lived in just over and over and over, like imagining, okay, here's the hallway where it goes down, there's my brother's room, here's my room. And I don't know, and I loved drawing mazes at that time too. Like I remember a friend of mine, we'd go over to his house after school and we would just sit and like come up with our own crazy mazes on like that 8.5 by 11 graph paper. And so I was really into architecture. My mom put me in a summer program, probably when I was 10 or so, and I had these really nerdy like round glasses and had a bowl cut. I was pretty awesome. But I mean, it was super cool because it was it was a small architecture firm in the town I grew up in, and they taught this class for like a week to kids who were interested. And so we would go around to the historic district, and they would show us and talk to us all about the different styles of architecture. And our big end of the class project was to create an actual model. Like, here, design out your own house on graph paper, and then build a 3D model, like a working model with all the room dividers, everything. So I remember I just used white chipboard, and mine just looked like a giant box. Like it just came straight up and just had a flat roof, and I mean it was ultra modern. Like I was ahead of the curve, and I looked at that, and then I remember there was one kid in my class specifically who I don't think he did this on his own. Like I'm pretty sure he had, because he had all the elevation grades, on his model, like of the ground, and then he had like these beams coming off the back porch.
No way.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And so I remember seeing his and thinking like, wow, mine really sucks. Like mine's just so basic and flat and white. But not until high school did I really become interested in more of the fine arts of painting and things like that. And then my senior year, I was introduced to graphic design and apples and Apple computers, not just the fruits, but my mom never kept. That's right. My mom never kept fruit in our house. No. That was the first time I'd ever seen or worked on a Mac before, and it was like an old G3 probably. Yeah. So, and a friend of mine, her dad was a fine artist, but they had a Mac at home, and I remember we would just kind of play around in a Quark. You remember Quark Express?
Oh yes.
Yeah, like doing layouts.
Many brochures ago.
So we did that, and then I graduated in 2000. I bought my own Mac shortly after I graduated. I moved to Texas, and I just started teaching myself Photoshop and Illustrator. I didn't know what I was doing. I took a few classes at community college, but professionally, I had one internship the summer of 2001 for about 3 months, and I had an amazing art director. She was all print, that was her background. This is really before the web kind of just took off in a mainstream sort of way. So she just taught me a lot about the print process. I did icon design, which is funny because I still have those original drawings from back then, and they're just so bad. I mean, I remember going in days and it was a paid internship, which is kind of unheard of these days, but for that summer it was awesome. And I would just go in and literally sketch and draw these little icons all day on huge, the transparent kind of paper. I forget what it's called.
Like tracing paper?
Yeah, kind of like big rolls of tracing paper. And I would just sit, and I shared a big cubicle. It was like a double cubicle with my art director on one side, and I sat in this little corner desk. So it's like, wow. I felt like you just put a dunce cap on me and just like have me drawing over there in the corner, and that's what I felt like. But no, they were a really great team. It was a pharmaceutical company of all things, which is really odd, but it was a really good experience, and I'm kind of surprised looking back on it that they even gave it to me, because all I had when I walked in the door to apply was an old school portfolio briefcase with just random paintings and pastel drawings from art class in high school. And but yeah, I mean, they saw something in what I had done before and gave me a chance. So I was really grateful for that. But pretty much there's just this whole dry period where after that internship I didn't pursue anything creatively until 2007, and so I was in the Air Force for 4 years too,
Oh
from
wow.
2003 to 2007, and spent 3 years in Japan. Ended up getting married during that time. I mean, there were other ways of getting my creative output, through
Yeah.
that period of time, but it definitely didn't come in the form of what it looks like now. But I guess the only clear memory I have of to what I'm doing today that I thought would be probably around 2001 or two, sitting in my parents' bedroom, living at home, and just thinking, because I had kept a journal at that point, and just like, man, I don't know how I can do it, but one day, all this stuff, just doodles and just random nonsense on this piece of paper, and transform that into some way to make a living one day. And that was kind of my dream. And I didn't know, 12 years ago what that would even look like. But I'm very fortunate, to say the least, that today, I can actually, that's how I make a living.
Yeah, definitely. So what kind of things were you doing during that period when you got out of the military and you got married? Did you just decide to say, hey, I'm just gonna pick up a job and figure something out later on?
My wife's one of her good friends had been doing web design for a while now, or back at that point had been doing web design for a while. And right before we transitioned out and moved back to Texas, we were talking on the phone, and she was like, "Yeah, you should really look, into this whole web design thing. I think you would be good at it." And I was like, "Okay." It's like, I don't even know what you're talking about, but sure. I mean, that if I could do that, that sounds great, because what I'm doing right now, I can't do that. I came back. I worked at Walgreens for a week. I left that job to take a job at Half Price Books, which I don't know if you guys have out there. It's just like a used bookstore. It's a pretty big, yeah, it's a big chain in Texas. But I thought it would be so cool. It was always a dream in high school to work at a bookstore or a record shop and be like that cool kid, that works there. It was anything. It was nothing like what I dreamed it would be. It's kind of depressing, actually. So,
Oh man.
so my wife's friend, who is also my friend, she helped me kind of blur the lines on a resume, and
Ah, pretty
and
cool.
she had a headhunter who she worked with previously on getting some jobs, and so she gave her my name and this resume, and I got a call, not but like maybe a week or two later, after she gave her that resume, and they said, "Hey, there's this small little IT company, and they're looking for a web designer. It's an entry level position." But I went in for an interview and was offered the job probably within the next week. And I mean, I was just ecstatic. Like, I was beside myself, just to be starting something new. But it was so funny because I think I just enrolled for night classes in a web design, like 101 class. So at the same time I start this job, I'm going to night school for,
To learn this stuff.
yeah, to learn web design. And so it was so funny because I would go into work I'd go to class at night, come in the next day and apply literally what I had learned, but
Oh,
my teacher was super cool because she was teaching standards, she
yeah,
was teaching CSS based design at the time, and Eric Meyer and Zeldman's
yeah.
book, I mean, those were, at that time in 2007, 2008, was really just kind of the cusp of that all becoming mainstream. And so she was kind of really on the forefront of that, which I was really grateful for, because my friend was all tables based. She was all about Dreamweaver and just using, like all the auto code
Mm-hmm.
help, which is just so atrocious. It's just awful. Um, so it was really awesome for me to learn that and to come into a company like that, who had been very traditional in the sense of, I mean, they were a Microsoft shop, so they were all .NET, and everything was built on, what's it called, SharePoint, or, yeah, it was just all their developers were .NET developers. So to come in with a little bit of a different thinking and to kind of try and apply these CSS standards and different ways of designing for our clients and even for our internal website. it was a really, really great learning experience. In hindsight, I'm very, again, like, you go through things and you can complain and bitch and moan about it while you're going through it. But I think the best way, you just keep a good attitude and you think like, well, if this isn't where I want to be, it's not going to last forever. And at least let me learn the most that I can learn from this experience. And then you just go on and do something else. And hopefully you go on and do better things, which I feel like in my case I did. And but I'm like, I feel like I've just been building the foundation over the years.
How long did you last in that web design job?
It was about 2.5 years.
And during
Yeah.
that time, you were already sort of beginning to focus on illustration, lettering, that kind of stuff.
Not initially. When I first got into that job, I just dove head first into web development and which I guess you call front end design. Went to a lot of meetups, WordPress meetups. Started to meet just a lot of people here locally that were into that scene, and we went to South by Southwest in 2009, maybe for the first time. And I mean, it's like, what would you compare it to? It's just a total nerd fest, and it's like these, like
So you
going
went to
down.
South by Interactive?
Yes,
Is that
to
what
the
you mean?
interactive portion. And it was just, you just kind of freak out because everybody there does the same thing that you do. And it's like everybody that you knew on Twitter was in one place at the same time. And so it's like you never want to sleep. And I remember I went home after that first year, and I was like sick for a whole week. Like my body just hated me. But
But
I mean,
why?
it was
Why?
just so.
Why'd you get sick? What,
Oh, why? Because
it was overwhelming.
no, I was out till 3 or 4 in the morning, and just no sleep and all
Oh man.
just craziness. But I was younger then too, which is okay. Uh, but probably not till about 2009, 2010, no, 2009 did I begin to slow down and kind of go back to putting pencil to paper, so to say, and starting where I was at. When I got into web design, I always started on my computer first, and then kind of reversing that role and starting on paper first.
Why the change?
Because it felt more, well, obviously it's more tangible, but it felt more honest to me. It felt more true to myself. It felt like the expression that I was able to bring to my work was more honest, and I was able to clearly express what I wanted to say, which is, I'm going to forget her name. A friend of mine, I think she still works at Twitter, Samantha
Oh
Toy.
yeah,
Yeah,
Samantha Warren.
Samantha Warren. Yeah, Samantha Toy, I think, is her Twitter handle
Yeah,
still. But at the time, she in Boston? I don't think she was in San Francisco at the time, but she
she
had,
may have been in Boston working
yeah,
for. Well, she was working for the army or something like that. She was designing for the army, and then
some, yeah.
yeah.
And she had spoken that first year at South by that I went, and she had actually used my website because I had just redone my header with a custom hand drawn.
Now,
Uh,
is this before she started the whole style tiles thing? And
yes,
yeah, okay.
yeah. This is pre that. And she had just used my site as an example of hand-drawn typography on the web. And I mean, this was like 2009, and I didn't even go in and sit in on her talk. And a friend of mine texted me. We were sitting outside in the hallway, and they said, "Hey, your website just popped up in this girl's talk." And I was freaking out. I was like, "What?" And so I went after it was over and met her, and said thank you about 100 times. She's super cool though. And yeah, so that kind of encouraged me for sure to keep pursuing what I was doing. If other people were taking note of it, and shoot, if they were willing to use it as an example, I mean, because I basically made that because no other font choice that I had available and all of the fonts ever fit what I felt was my style, what I wanted to say about me to the world on my website. And I feel like that's what not that everybody needs to draw with their hands. I'm not saying that, but for me, that's how it worked out. And so I've just kind of been running with it ever since.
When you were working at your job as a web designer,
Yeah.
did you get caught up in the imperfection perfecting things, making them look, you know, as they say, pixel perfect?
I, I've been caught up in perfecting things since as long as I can remember. I'm a big perfectionist in just about most things I do, and my wife could attest to this, that I'm in my not so bright and shiny moments kind of an asshole. But um, if I'm being completely honest, no. But yeah, I mean, attention to detail is very important to me, and so I would say web design definitely lends itself to being very. I mean, you're down to the number, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you can move a pixel however many you need to move it to get it right. Um, so yeah, and that kind of aggravated me. Like under the surface, that was always a little unsettling to me because nothing is perfect. Like, hello, like that's just the truth. Like we can make things look shiny and crisp and like have clean lines and in Illustrator and Photoshop, but the way that life works, the life just is not perfect, and we blur around the edges, and we're a little shaky and messy at times. So to me, that's why I felt more myself in the last few years, being able to do the work by hand and express myself that way.
What has hand drawn work or hand drawn lettering and illustrating? What has it? Is that what it taught you? Because I've take a look at your work and you see the sort of hand drawn elements or maybe imperfections, if you will.
Yes, I think so.
Have you sort of let go? Have you let go of being very keep making it very perfect, or have you? Is it sort of still part of the overall thing? I don't know if I'm making myself clearer, but
I think I hear what you're saying. Yeah. So right, there's this. Well, two things that come to mind. There's this very popular rise of this trend of everything being handmade and hand drawn these days. Uh, you look at Pinterest, you look at Dribble, you just look on the internet, and it's there. Um, which is great. I think it's really really great that more people are using their hands to make artwork and to make things, and not just relying on a tool like the computer. Sorry, I just shook my screen, but uh, yeah. But for me, I feel like the best ideas come out oftentimes in the first try. And whenever I try and go back and revise and revise and revise to get that line cleaner, to make it perfect, I'm losing a lot of the soul and the very being that it was in the first just rough drawing that it was. So a lot of times I'll just go back and just like scrap all my revisions and be like, I love the raw feeling of this first one, even though it may be a little off here or there. Um, I kind of like that about it. So yeah, like you said, embracing the imperfection is a big part of it for me.
let's talk about motivations, keeping and staying motivated. You have written about this previously. I'm just going to read a little piece here
Sure.
that you've written, and you said, "I lost my motivation. The engine ran out of steam. Only now, looking back on it, I see it as a great disservice to myself and my readers." This is about keeping that,
Yep.
keeping writing on your blog, for instance,
Yes.
and not finishing what I started. So, what have you learned, and what do you? I'm so bad at asking these
You're
questions.
good. So that's one of my ongoing, I don't even know what to call it, challenges maybe of my life is having too many ideas and not finishing the ones that I start. Specifically relating to the blog series that I was writing about, everything sounds good in theory, and then it's much harder in the actual execution to follow through. And writing is just one of those things that's, I mean, I can say specifically about the 52 profiles project I did 2009 or 10, where I drew one person's profile every week for an entire year. And that project specifically was meant to push myself, one, creatively in illustrating, and two, just to finish the damn thing, like to to prove to myself that I could have an idea and I could see it through and finish it. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't get to June or July and suddenly find myself 2 months behind and have to play catch up, but that's because that's what happened. But instead of giving up and instead of letting my own internal self say, you're a loser, you should just give up, you're already 2 months behind, nobody cares anymore, and all this negative thinking and just the way that we sometimes and oftentimes will speak to ourselves internally, of tuning that out and not listening and pushing through anyways, because the feeling and the sense of pride that comes with just pushing through that wall and that barrier of resistance. We have our own self-resistance as well as like external forces that, life is always busy. There's always going to be an excuse not to do something, right? But we can carve out time. We can create time. We can make the hours work. We can stop watching so much TV, or we can, whatever. We can wake up early. I'm not a big proponent of going to bed later. I believe sleep is important, but now at this stage in my life with a newborn, I get as much sleep as I can.
No, Kyle, that's a good point that you brought up. Let's talk more about time, because as you mentioned, you have a newborn and you still have this work to produce. This is what you do. So, how have you managed that? How have you managed your time and be able to, do your things at home, spend time with the family, still get the work out there? How do you do it? That's a tough question, but how do you do it?
It's a tough thing to do. I mean, the doing is very tough. I think one thing that helps more than any other is a wife who really supports me and trusts me and believes in what I'm doing, which is, that's just a blessing in and of itself. So for that, I'm very thankful. I think the second most important thing we have is communication. So I have to communicate with her what my schedule looks like. What projects do I have going on? What am I working on? And she's really good at asking me those questions, even though I'm not all the time good at just voluntarily letting her know what I'm working on. So I'm getting better about that. But our communication together, because we're a team, and especially now having a daughter, and even though she's a stay-at-home mom, and she does that job beautifully, there's still time, since I work for myself and I balance that time between working at home and working at a co-working space here, that if she needs a break, if she needs to just have time to herself, that I can carve that out of my schedule and give her an hour or two. So but for me, it just comes down to communication, and that's communicating with my clients, being very honest with them about what my schedule looks like, and even projecting into the future if we have something planned, like we're going to be out of town. Like I have a retainer client right now who I'm working with, and I'm always just trying to stay one step ahead. I'm trying to stay in constant communication with them and getting any feedback I need, or just discussing new ideas. I think the worst thing you could do when it comes to time, especially if you're working for yourself, or if you're working for a company and you have to talk to clients or you have to talk to your bosses, if you're not communicating with them and you're just kind of falling back and dropping off the radar, that to me is a little more worrisome. It's fine if they know like you're in the zone and you're getting a lot of work done, but it's also good to let them know like, hey, I may be out of touch X amount of hours this day, or for whatever the situation looks like, because it's different for every person. But for me, it's just about communicating that time with my wife and carving out the space that I need, because I know how much time it takes me to sit down and brainstorm an idea and sketch and draw, that whole process,
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. That's it's something that people have that question. They don't know who to ask. So you're the victim.
It's good. No, I'm more than happy to share. I mean, it's taken me many, many years, just from a relational sense, to be a better communicator. So yeah, I mean, I'm always learning. I feel like there's always ways to improve the level of conversation and the depth of it, and just the way that you clearly and concisely can articulate, what you want to say, how do you want to say it, and yeah, so it's important. It's just it's a part of being human that we have to communicate with one another. There's nothing greater than obviously face to face, but oftentimes in these days, we're over email or texting or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, I'm going to take it back again before
Okay.
you got into freelance work. So what, if you could tell us what practical steps you've taken, and what would you advise someone who would like to get into a freelance career?
Not to? Yeah. A few things. I guess I would give advice to somebody that was in that they found themselves at a cubicle and being envious and jealous and looking over the fence and seeing the pretty flowers and how green the grass was on the other side is something I've come to realize in my own life and just my own journey of freelance, is that the grass is never greener on the other side, but it's it just it's about how much you cultivate that ground and how much fertilizer you put into it and how much sweat and love and blood and tears that you put into making that grass grow. And I'm speaking metaphorically, of course, but it really is. It's
It's a
like
great analogy.
you don't just jump over the fence and automatically you're in this lush field of everything is handed to you. And yeah, you just have to work really hard for it. And I worked really hard for a number of years while I still held a job in the evenings. And thank God that it was before we had a baby, because I don't know how I would do it now. But yeah, I would put in the late nights. I'd put in the weekend hours. A lot of those things now that I carve out specifically for my family time, which I don't work in the evenings normally, and I don't work on weekends. Those were the things that I had to put in because that's what I wanted. I was chasing my dream to become where I am today. And yeah, it's not just as easy as quitting a job and putting some prints up and setting up a little website and having a shop ready to sell some stuff, because people aren't just going to flock automatically, and that's not how it works, at least in my experience. Um, so I mean, I would just say have a plan. I can only give advice from my perspective of being married, in which we had serious conversations of what that would look like. We put aside a large amount in savings in our bank account
Nice.
to have a safety net for that first year. I mean, that's always the budgeting, the balancing of our money is something that's always on the table. Because when you work for a company, it's very easy to budget, and you have paychecks steadily, and that's the quote unquote job security that people feel like they can't leave behind. But the truth is, you could go into work tomorrow and be fired, and there's no security in a 9 to 5, and that's the truth that I've learned too. That I'm constantly having to just trust and have faith that the work is going to continue to flow in, and trust that if something does happen and everything dries up, then I'll go do something else. I'll go. I don't know what I'll do, but it's like you have to have that kind of, not survivor mentality, but you have to have that
It's kind
that
of fight
just
or
will.
flight.
Yeah, that just go getter. You just have to be willing to go after what you want and not expect things to just come to you and to just show up on your doorstep.
Does it get really stressful a lot of times, or do you have good control over that, over your daily work and daily
It
routine?
can get. Yeah, daily routines for me look a lot different now than they even did a year ago. But I don't know. I mean, there's ways to manage stress. There's ways that you can let the stress consume you. Um, I mean, I just feel like if I can be responsible on my end, and I can take care of what I know I have to do, um, that's the best I can do. I just have to give it my all. And sometimes it's stressful and a little irritating when clients don't respond to you, or when they're taking too long and this and that. There's factors outside of your control that can be stressful. But my wife often reminds me that, just to relax and it's going to be okay. And I haven't come across a situation yet in the past 3 years where it hasn't been okay. So even I'll share like a personal story of last year. I worked with a app called Over.
Yeah,
and
I do
it
remember.
was and it was a wonderful experience. The team that I worked with was phenomenal. Um, I started to contract with them at first, and they brought me on to full-time employee. And 4 months later, ended up not being quote unquote fired, but they kind of repositioned me back to more of a contract basis.
This
But
is a year ago.
yeah, this was last summer. And but at that time in our lives, my wife was pregnant. Uh, we were looking at moving to Colorado in that time. We've tabled that discussion now. We're staying here in Dallas. Like I said, we just bought our home a month ago.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful.
I know that's a lot of that alone is stressful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that day that happened, and I had that conversation with my boss Aaron, and I called my wife, and I was like, I don't know whether to laugh or to cry right now. And but I often like to think I thrive most in the challenging moments of the unknown. And to me, in my personal life, it's like I feel like that's when God comes in most often, and surprises me with things that it's like I didn't ever expect. And so looking back in the way that I was let go, where I had this kind of security, of being paid every month, and things were good. The future was looking really bright. We were going to build amazing things, and then to be like, yeah, we just kind of want to take you back to, not part time. What did I just say?
Contract.
Contract, yeah. And I was like, okay, but it's actually, it's been really good. I've been able to go on and build more of quote unquote my brand. But yeah, I just feel like it's been for the best.
So that was definitely a blessing in disguise. So you could
oh yeah
go this other direction and focus on, like you said, your brand and what you're producing for yourself.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. And I don't believe it's bad to build a brand for somebody else and to work. Like I totally am a big believer in we build something greater together instead of just building something by ourselves. And that's actually been a big question I've tossed back and forth within myself. The last year is, what does it look like for me to build something bigger than just my own brand and to work with others? And at the beginning of this year, I thought I might go back to a full-time gig somewhere at an agency or something, but the more this year has just moved on, and these opportunities, like I feel that's not really the direction. So I'm not sure if it's going to be my own agency or just a collective of people that I work with on a consistent basis or what. But I definitely know that we as individuals can only build so much, and then we have to begin to trust others that we can work with to build things that are even greater.
So Kyle, you've given a ton of great insight as far as what you've gone through as a freelancer, the ups and downs. So that being said, what would you say to someone who wants to leave their 9 to 5? Just there, I guess in a few words, what would you just say to that person before they make that jump?
I would just tell them not to be hasty, to be very, to just be patient in their decision making. I wouldn't jump at the first opportunity they had. I tried to jump at the first opportunity I had to go full-time freelance, but I ended up stepping back, and I got another offer from a company, and I was at that job for just about a year and a half. and it was another great stepping stone. It provided more of a cushion for my wife and I, and I learned a lot of great things while I was there. So, sometimes the opportunity will come up like it seems like the right time, and it may be, but for me, I think not rushing into anything is a lot better. Or, I mean, what am I trying to say? Being more patient is a lot better than rushing into something.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. I always ask this question. Do you have any book recommendations? Anything that inspires you? Anything that keeps you motivated? Anything that you would recommend for other designers, visual artists, illustrators?
There's a couple that come to mind. Not local to Dallas, but local to Texas. His name is Austin Kleon.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, you're familiar. He's written a couple books. How to Steal Like an Artist is one, which is really good. It's just very short, kind of to the point. Similar in the same vein as what's his name from 37 Signals?
Jason Fried.
Yeah, Jason Fried's book.
Rework, Remote.
Rework. There it is. Yep. See, you knew. It's probably on your bookshelf behind you.
It's right back there somewhere.
Yeah. The Designer's Handbook, Artist Guild or something. Artist Guild Handbook. There's one post, and this isn't a book, but who I saw was also on your show, Jessica Hish. Her blog post about pricing and stuff is pretty. I mean, it's pretty on point. It's you could read the same thing in the Graphic Artists Guild handbook, but she breaks it down in a very relatable way when dealing with a client's email that comes to you. So I'd say kudos to her on writing that, because it's pretty on point. There's a lot of leisurely reading that I enjoy. Some of the best books I've read in the last couple of years, like I went back and read The Hobbit, which I'd never actually read before, and it's way better than any of the movies. And I just love getting lost in Tolkien's story. Like, the way he tells the story is just super engaging and inspiring. And even as many as millions and billions of dollars they spent on making that movie, I don't think they come anywhere close to just the way your imagination carries you in a book. I think you can't beat that.
Those are good ones. All right, so Kyle, before we wrap it up, this is the big question here, man.
All right.
Hold on to your seat.
I'm holding.
So if there's one piece of advice, you've given a ton of advice, by the way, but if there's just one piece of advice that you would give to a person, again, an artist or a designer, illustrator that would like to get into freelance, would like to, like you said, you just mentioned the quote unquote, to getting to the next level, what would that be?
Don't give up. That seems like a no-brainer to say. Don't listen to the negative voices. I was going to say negativity. I would say have people around you that support you, that can encourage you, that are that believe in what you're doing, and because there's nothing valuable like having people in your corner that not just to puff you up and make you feel good about yourself when you're having a bad day, but that genuinely care about you, and just having that kind of community support around you, I think, is super valuable. And
where could people find you online? Where could we reach out?
So my website, obviously, kylesteed.com. I'm on Twitter at Kyle Steed. On Instagram at Kyle Steed. My email and everything is on my website, so that should be enough bases to cover.
Sweet. So everything Kyle Steed.
Yes.
All across.
Which is, can I make one final point?
Yeah.
Probably in 07, 08, when I was first getting my website up, I struggled that year, probably the whole year of, what do I call myself? Should I brand myself? Should I have a different name? It seemed like anybody that was just like one-man shop, a freelancer or whatever, had a bigger overarching brand that they worked underneath. And I tried so many different things, and nothing sounded right. Nothing ever looked right as just having my name. And now, 7 years later, I think it was one of the best decisions I ever made just to buy my own domain name.
Oh, yeah.
And to start building stuff, because now it's really been to my advantage that I have had that website for 7 years and that it's built so much traffic and whatever, all that metadata information. But for me personally now, working for myself, it's a huge advantage, and I don't have to worry about ever going back and taking things from one brand and bringing it back to my own and saying like I had this project or whatever. I just thought it was funny because at the beginning I worried so much about doing it right and having the right like brand name, whereas really all it took is just having my own name on there. That was good.
So everyone, you can find everything that we talked about here on the show with Kyle on pencilversuspixel.com/Kyle Steed. So that's pencilvspixel.com/Kyle Steed.
Steed.
What's that?
I always have to spell my last name for people.
Oh, yeah. Spell it out.
Steed.
That's right. Kyle Steed. Kyle, man, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And everyone, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Cheers.